So today we are online here, and last time we spoke about the political Islam, and we won't have time to continue with that discussion. But just before, as an introduction, I would like to cite you the current example of the World Cup in Qatar that we live in. If you look at the news, both in the classical and social media, you see that it raises quite a lot of controversies at different levels. Um, and I think this course wants to teach you or teach us that we have to struggle to keep our critical thought, our critical insight about what's going on, uh, even when it concerns Muslim societies, or especially when it concerns Muslim societies, actually. So even as we are Muslim believers, we have to keep the critical eye on the content of that because actually, on the one hand, you have Qatar organizing the World Cup, and obviously you have quite a lot of Islamic symbols, uh, um, also Islamic da'wah discourses. You feel that some stakeholders or some of the actors in Qatar try to use the circumstance or occasion as a way to present Islam to the world, mostly to non-Muslim societies, to non-Muslim people going to Qatar or just watching what happened in the social media and in the television. So you have this da'wah taking place by talks, by showing some good example, good manners, welcoming people, and so that's one thing. And we can debate on this. We can ask ourselves if it's done in a suitable way for Muslim. But first, before discussing the relevance of it, we try to understand it. Of course, now it's ongoing, so we're talking about the present, which doesn't let me time or doesn't let us time to analyze in depth. But still, we can reflect on what's the purpose of doing that. What's the goal? Is the goal to propagate Islam? Is it not? Is it to give a good picture, or is it just to implement Islam in our life? And then you have people who will feel that what's happening there is suitable for Islam, is suitable for Islam, for Muslims as well. But others will, including Muslim believers, will look at that in a more critical perspective, saying that, okay, it's good to speak about Islam, but what about implementing Islam in many aspects of our social life, economy, politics, the way we deal with others, helping people, not wasting, and these very core values, Islamic principles we found in the text. So that's another more critical perspective, which doesn't prevent to also acknowledge that it can be interesting for people who have the first exposure of the life to Islam. Maybe imagine somebody coming from Brazil, going to Qatar for the World Cup, maybe found out, okay, now I got a understanding of Muslims, Islamic culture. So I don't say that everything is bad or not everything is good about that. Just trying to promote a sound understanding, cautious understanding, not to be too rushy in that, because now in the time of social media, often there is no time for the analysis. Everybody comments so fast. Oh, it's very good. Oh, it's very bad. Oh, they are devilish. Oh, they are like we are proud as a Muslim to be part of the. We are proud to be part of the Ummah when we see Qatar and World Cup. I've checked the social media, mostly Facebook. I read such comments. Oh, because of Qatar, we are proud to be Muslims. So on the one hand, I feel it's very weird. Yeah, I mean, how come you are proud to be Muslim because of a World Cup, soccer, football World Cup? On the one hand, I try to understand why the person write that. And here it resonates with the last part of the course. You know, like the 2 3 weeks ago, we spoke about the identity issues and the revivalism in Islam after the fall of the Ummah and after the 17th, mostly speaking, we have this idea of identify ourselves as Muslim, and that shows us also um, there's new spread of the idea of a Muslim global identity, which is in line with what you can see now in the way Muslims, some of the Muslims, portray themselves in the social media, talking about pride and Qatar and so. But at the same time, um, you have a lot of critique from the West. But what means the West today? Can say from the West because they are like mainstream Occidental, like the West American, West European, and North American media talking about the Qatar in a bad perspective. People say, are they criticized because they are Arabs and Muslims, so they don't want Muslims to have any role in the world? And on the one hand, to some extent, I think it's true to say so, but also it's very complicated because also what's the West? You know, you have Vietnamese, you have Japanese, you have Indian maybe having the same anti-Muslim hatred or not liking the way Muslims live. Like, think about the fact that alcohol is banned. So alcohol is banned. So a lot of people won't like that. Not just the Western people, also people from other environments. So you have the idea, finally, of a so-called clash between Islam and between the rest. Not to say the West, but the West and its followers, which would be in clash with the Ummah, with Islam, broadly speaking. This is just a hypothesis when you look at some social media comments or even the mainstream media commentators about the event, trying to show, these Muslims are their way of life. It's wrong. What's wrong with them? You know, we don't like the way they are. We don't like the way they live, and they want to promote the style against that. So it's very interesting based on these sport events to observe so many ways, configurations, so many underlying issues that this kind of event can show. You know, it just reveals what people also have in their subconscious or what they have in their untold perception. And I think that the underlying major issue you feel if you observe that from critical eye, you feel it may enhance the so-called clash of civilization between Muslims and the rest, or Islam and the West, whatever we call them. I think everybody knows what we mean, which is very problematic because in both so-called camps, you have many speakers, many influencers emphasizing the issue of fueling the problem, fueling the hatred in both camps. You know, you have people like in Europe, mostly in France, Muslims say, these white people, Western people, they hate the Arabs and they hate Muslims, so we hate them too, blah blah blah. You know, then you have this idea of identity Islam. Identity Islam meaning that Islam became like a race, became like a belonging, became like a, civilization more than a faith. So people are able to contradict the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam based on their identity problems. And it's quite common. Unfortunately, it's quite common in some countries. At the other extreme, you have some Western hating Islam, taking that, trying to find the problem in the World Cup and saying, these Muslims, whatever they do is a problem for humanity. So I think, yeah, we live these kind of things, but when looking at the TV, when looking at the social media, not just in one country, but in many countries at the same time, we can feel that something wrong is happening in any, regardless of who we are, regardless of if we are Muslims or not. But too much effort or too much food is put to fuel the conflict. And I think that's something in this course we should be aware of, and we should be quite critical and be careful with all of these tendencies today. If you have any questions, any comments, you can also ask, even if we are online, you can ask either in the chat or just talk, because we are only 8 here, okay? I hope everybody is listening to me, or everybody can hear me well, hopefully, yeah?
Yes, very well, sir.
Okay, thank you. So that's just a comment to start this course, because again, it's totally in line with our concern, it's totally in line with the content of this course by itself, contemporary Muslim society, and again, it's also in line with your assignments and purpose of the assignments, meaning we connect a context, space, and time to an issue. The issue can be political, social, cultural, or ideological, religious issue, whatever it is. So here we have a lot of food for thought, because this World Cup is supposed to be about sport, but it shows a lot of things regarding so-called civilizations and regarding religion, Islam worldwide, also how Islam is portrayed by non-Muslims, or how Islam is perceived far away from its borders. So this content analysis, when looking to the social media, to the mainstream media, is something we is not easy to do, because it's going very fast, and everybody has feeling. When I say everybody has feeling, the problem, when you look at the comments, for instance, you're not insensitive, so you feel things, you get upset, or you think, okay, what he wrote is nice, what he wrote is bad, what she said is wrong, and so and so. And it's not easy to remain objective, or more or less objective in the analysis, but we should try to develop some critical understanding based on these very concrete events, issues, meaning that it's um, it's exactly like your sentiments. We start by something tangible. We start by something we can feel, but with the idea to speak about broader subjects, broader issues, hidden or underlying problems. That's the goal. That's the top. That's how we can develop a critical thought that aims to improve the situation. We start by something concrete, visible, tangible, case study. We can call it a case study by itself, is World Cup. But then we think about underlying problems. What are there? These problems are, for instance, the identity Islam, what it means, what we mean that by that. It's like, when I say identity Islam, just to be very short, is like, on the one hand, you have subhanallah, 5 minutes left in my meeting. What happens? I think I have to reconnect, and yeah, I will send you a new link, maybe, because I don't know why. Well, I made a mistake maybe in the recording, because yeah. So if the meeting cut, I will just put the new link in the group as soon as possible. Okay. but we still have a few minutes. Then we change the topic also. That will be a break, 5 minutes break. So actually, yes, identity Islam or like how genuine Islam. Like Islam is not supposed to be a cloth we put on ourselves. Rather, it's supposed to be a way of life and a worldview we try to follow and to apply. So when I call identity Islam is not the desire to fulfill Islamic guidelines, but it's the desire to show off being Muslims and believing that just the fact to call ourselves as Muslim put us in a specific civilization, cultural group, environment, ethnical group, and so. So it's kind of a category. You use Islam as a label to put on you and say, "Oh, that's my identity. That's who I am." But actually, what about Muslims who don't even believe? If they don't believe, they are not Muslims. Yes. But with this identity Islam, you find many Muslims they don't want to follow Islam, but they still call themselves Islam. It's a cultural definition of it, which is quite problematic, but getting widespread, and the argumentation of the clash of civilization. You know, that's how it's getting fueled also by some of the stakeholders behind that, because they prefer Muslims to refer to identity Islam rather than following genuinely Islamic teachings in their worldview, in the way of life. So we define it what Islam is first. So Islam is not identity, actually, because Islam is not something we have in the blood or we have in our physical nature. Actually, Islam concerns a person who struggle to follow Islam, but if he doesn't want to follow anymore Islam, we cannot call him Muslim anymore if he doesn't interested in this. But today we swim in quite a lot of confusion when talking about identity Islam. Yes. So let me 5 minutes sharing the next the another link because the time was blocked till 4 here. I don't know why. So now I will send in the group in a few minutes the next link. Sorry for that. See you later in a few minutes, inshallah.
Noted. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome back again. So I was commenting a bit what we can see on social media regarding the World Cup, Qatar, and the way everybody is speaking about Islam and Muslims in both directions. Some trying to deliver a positive image of Muslims and Islam, promoting da'wah through books or talks or whatever they can, but also a lot of people, non-Muslims coming from the West or other parts of the world, criticizing what's happening there regarding consumption of alcohol, organization, or policy of Qatar, and then speaking about Muslims and Islams. And we feel that there is quite of a tension between different kind of discourses, and that's quite problematic today. What I advocate for first for about that problem is we have to make sure to develop our critical thinking. And I proposed the concept of identity Islam in opposite to what we can call Islam. Islam, as we defined it in the first course, can be viewed as a tradition, discursive tradition, to take back the denomination, the concept of Talal Assad, anthropologist. So discursive tradition is one way to define Islam. Another way is to call the Arabic word Deen, Islamuddin, or Deen al-Islam, meaning way of life plus worldview, both at the same time. It's a worldview which shapes the way of life. So that's a way to understand Islam. If we understand Islam like that, if we define it like that, then identity Islam makes no sense. But in a sociological perspective, it exists because you will see a lot of people, they'll say, we are representatives of Muslims, we are Muslims, I speak on the name of Islam, and so and so. But actually, they say things that have nothing to do with the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to make sure to be critical, to be aware of this tension between what we call by Islam, what we call by Muslims today, and not to be stuck in our emotional feeling that may put us having sympathy for people looking at, like us, even if they don't apply Islam. That's something different. So sometimes we get confused between cultural belonging, so-called civilization belonging, and religious affiliation. That's one thing that this event reminds me, and I just wanted to begin the talk by speaking about that because it's the news. It's what happened these days. Now, I tried to share a screen to speak about Islam in South Africa, but because a few time ago I promised to deliver a presentation about that, I think it's something looking like what you expected to do for your assignment. So I will show you a few slides about the case study of Islam in Cape Town. I did quite a long time ago, but I think that it can show an example of what I expect from your own work at home. So can you see the screen or not yet?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, clear.
So I want to speak about Islam in South Africa. As you can see here, it was based. The idea is like your assignment, more or less. It was not for the same purpose, but it was a broad reflection of Islam in a specific location, in a specific context, namely Cape Town. The plan here, the idea was to provide a contemporary insight of the Muslim community of Cape Town, also going beyond the historic facts to think about concrete examples, to speak about relevant issues, and based on investigation, but also it raised questions more than answers, which is totally fine, even for your own assignment. I think often when we try to develop some research, to conduct research, we get more questions, new concerns, new things we want to understand than definitive answers. So that's totally fine. That's an exercise like a cycle. We develop a study which call for further study and so on. So that's an attempt somehow. Here you see why is the South African case relevant. I've spoken about it the last time, but it's important to see that it's an ancient community. It's not a migrant Muslim based community like you have in Western Europe or South America or North America. It's a historical Muslim presence. Uh, However, it's very low in percentage. Only 2% Muslims are in South Africa. In Cape Town, it's slightly more, but only 7%, which seems very small. But it's interesting because someone traveling there, according to the neighborhood he will go to, may feel he is in a Muslim majority country. Although they are only 7% of the presence, but in some neighborhoods they are very organized. And it's important also to say that they are allowed to call the adhan. They call for the prayer loud 5 times a day. And a lot of things, a lot of aspects make the case very different than what you can see in other countries where Islam has no historical presence. Mostly it's because Islam is accepted as a local reality by South African. Also, worldwide, you have an important impact with a lot of scholars. You had the well-known Da'i, the Da'i called Ahmed Didat, like the preacher. But you have also a lot of people going there for visits before, like the American Muslim speakers, such as Abdul Hakim Quick, Abdul Qadir al-Sufi from Murabitun from the UK, Imran Hussein from Trinidad, Habib Omar from Yemen, Habib al-Jifri from the UAE, Fazlur Rahman al-Ansari, rahimullah, from Pakistan, a well-known scholar. So you had all these scholars often traveling to Cape Town, which is quite interesting because they don't travel to many other countries as much as they travel to South Africa. I think we can say that the reason of these scholars traveling to South Africa is linked to the to the freedom they found, the freedom they found in preaching Islam, in delivering Islam relating to economic, social, and political aspect, which is often not really the case in a Muslim majority country where Islam is institutionalized. But South Africa is not a Muslim country, so you have more freedom to speak about Islam, especially, of course, after the apartheid, because before the apartheid, there were not much freedom, not much space. But all the scholars, not all, but most of them, have been to South Africa after apartheid in 1994. My starting point, how did I get interest to study Islam in South Africa? I told you last time, I think in Jordan, I met the son of a Muslim scholar, and he was studying Islam for 2 years. in South Africa, not in Cape Town, but in a madrasa of the related to the Tabligh movement, the Deobandi school. But also you have a lot of Muslim scholars writing their life stories about South Africa. It attracts my reflection. You have also what we call Islamic Theology of Liberation Movement by Farid Ishaq, who is a local Muslim writer. And I took part in a summer school with him in 2018 called Critical Muslim Studies. So it was my first visit in the country. We visited different neighborhoods, a lot of mosques, including in poor, segregated neighborhoods. But 2 years later, 3 years later, I went back to Cape Town to teach. I lectured, I gave a course entitled Contemporary Muslim Society and Organizations. So it was a 30 hours course, mostly for imams and students of Ulum Sharia in the IPSA College, International Peace College, South Africa. So I had more time to investigate and to try to understand the feature of the local Muslim community. First, I think today we won't have time to go to the presentation in its whole, but it's okay because we still have the Wednesday session. But what I wanted to tell you is that first is always interesting and important to have a historical insight. History is not something sometimes we want to focus on too much. We want to speak about it, but more to get the background, to know where things come from. We need it. Doesn't mean that we need to speak 3 or 4 hours about that, but I think even in your assignments you will need to keep a bit of space to show the background, including a few reminders of history. Yeah. So we have two main periods. No, more than two main periods, but going back to the time of the Islamic history of Cape Town, South Africa. The first period, starting at 1650 to 1750, so like about 300 or 400 years ago, Islam came by the fact that the Dutch colonizers or Dutch armies try to explore and exploit new territories, including Cape Town. But at the same time, they went to Indonesia, and from Indonesia, they take back slaves. But these slaves, called the Malay, what they called Malay were not just Indonesian. It was a mix of people coming from the Indian Ocean till Java, Indonesian, Java, but including Sumatra, including Sri Lanka, which are not Malays, including maybe Madagascar. So a few people from different areas were taken as slaves and deported to Cape Town. Why? Because these people also they were selected and due to the problem, the threat they represent against the Dutch colonizers. So, for instance, if the Dutch went to Java and they found out that a well-known religious scholar is a threat for them, they would most likely take him and send him to Cape Town, where he was a slave. Yeah. So the Muslim prisons first it was built through slavery, but the slaves were very knowledgeable Muslims most of the time. So they keep Islam with them and they teach them to their sons, to their descendants. A well-known story is that one of the slaves wrote the Quran by heart because they didn't come with any books. They didn't come with the Mus'haf. So they came as slaves. But one knew more than one, but one story about one well-known man, I forget his name, new Quran by heart, and he wrote from Surah Al-Fatiha, Baqarah to Surah Al-Nas. This Quran is still available in a mosque in Cape Town. If you visit, you can find it. Then you have in the 17th, 18th century, you have exile of other Muslim leaders, same stories, and they were called Malay. So we start to see the emergence of so-called Malay communities, which is now called the Cape Malays. They covered Islamic practice because in most time it wasn't possible for them to live Islam, so they had to hide to keep Islam, but they succeed to transmit it through generations. The first mosque in Cape Town was Masjid Al-Awwal, the Arabic first mosque, built in 1794. 1794. So much later. Why? Because it wasn't possible. It wasn't. It was prohibited to organize Islamic cult before that period. Then much later, you have a second period of Muslim presence in Cape Town coming from Indian migrants, the farmers brought by the British colonizers also, 19th century, so much later, and less than the Malays one, less in numbers. And finally, Black African converted to Islam at the end of the 20th century, so just a few years ago, a few decades ago. Also, you have, after the apartheid, you found quite a lot of migrants from Senegal, from Morocco, from Egypt, from Pakistan, from diverse countries, which fuel the Islamic presence of Cape Town. So that's for the history. That's interesting to see that Islam in Cape Town comes from various backgrounds, various gateways, not just one. But the most obvious was the Malay, or so-called Malay slaves or descendants of slaves. Yeah. Today we have still a Muslim community which is quite divided in terms of ethnic background. You have, for talking about South Africa generally, it's not the same than Cape Town. You have predominantly Indian Muslims. So either the one who came before through the British, they came as workers 100 years ago, or the new migrants, but all coming from India or Pakistan. Then you have the black South African converted to Islam, and then you have also African migrants. That's the Muslims, broadly speaking, you find in the country, except in Cape Town. Cape Town is organized a bit differently. Most Muslims are the so-called Malay, the Cape Malays, which are part of the colored community, because due to the apartheid, the local community in Cape Town, the society is divided in three ethnic groups: the black, the colored, and the white. But colored means what? Colored means everything which is not totally black, not totally white. So like every racial category is nonsense by itself, but it's social construction of reality, showing that here the Malay will be part of the colored, but even the India will be part of the colored. And even a guy whose father is black and whose mother is white will be a colored. Yeah, it's everything between white and black. Also, you have the foreigners, West African, European, and so sometimes they are Muslims. And that shows the landscape of Muslim presence today in Cape Town. We're quite divided between the Malays, the Indians, and the black converts. Yes? In terms of ideology, Islamic streams or trends you can identify in the local Muslim community. you found we have spoken about that 3-4 weeks ago. We found an important differences as well. First, Islam in Cape Town mostly belongs to traditional schools, العقيدة الأشعرية, الفقه الشافعي, والتصوف. Traditional Islam, like in Indonesia with Nahdlatul Ulama, like in Malaysia, most of the country follow these things, this traditional Islam. Meaning they have a lot of dhikr gatherings, recitation of Quran, dhikr after the prayers like the Shafi'i do here. Meaning when you complete Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, then the Imam speaks louder for the adhkar, saying Astaghfirullah alladhi الذي لا إله إلا الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم وأتوب إليه, for instance, 3 times. Then Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam tabarak ya dal jalal wa ikram. Then ayat al-kursi. Then subhanallah. Then dua. You have this system of Islamic prayer, which is quite typical of Madhab Shafi'i, and you find the same in Malaysia today and same in Cape Town, which shows the historical lineage between this approach to Islam. But that's for the traditionalist movement, which is dominant. But still, now you found new other Islamic movements, a strong Jamaat Tabligh, but Jamaat Tabligh is linked to the Indian diaspora, Indian background Muslims, not the Malays. You have also Sufi Turuq at-Tasawwuf, like Naqshbandiyya, Tijaniyya, Qadiriyya. Of course, the Alawi from Yemen that you found in Malaysia too. And also Shia groups, but very minority and marginalized also. They are even considered as non-Muslims by many of them. So they stay in their environment. You have quite a lot of Islamic schools, madrasa, yes. Many foreign Muslims come to memorize the Quran and learn the fiqh. Learn the fiqh Hanafi because these madrasa are held by the Indian Muslims. Yeah. That's the very particular insight of the Muslim community you can find in that city, which has only 7% of people being Muslim, but seems very organized in terms of Islamic life when you see these various movements and so. Next Wednesday, we'll speak about social and political recognition of Islam in Cape Town and different things also linked to politics. I will show you a few pictures. Why we are doing here, mostly it's also to give you an example of the presentation you can do, even if it's not the same. It's not the same assignment, but the idea that is everybody here in the group, either in the group of 2 or either individually, everybody of us, we try to speak about the context with Muslims, with Islam today, like a context of space and time related to social, economic, political issues. So I wanted to do the same, more or less, not the same exercise, but also to speak about one concrete case. So next Wednesday, I will complete the slides. And if you have any questions now, you can ask me through the chat. Just take the flow, just speak loud if you want. Thank you. Okay.
No
Assalamu alaikum.
question.
Yes, sorry?
No questions. Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. In the chat, nothing. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, brother Muhammad Izzuddin. Everything is clear. Okay, alhamdulillah. So I think we keep an hour for this online presentation, because online is quite long to speak, an hour 30. So if you're okay with that, we'll keep for an hour, and I will put the slides right now on MS Teams. And Wednesday, same time, inshallah, we continue the same presentation. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can always contact me by email. And the schedule is okay for you on Wednesday, or you want another time?
Okay for me.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, that's fine. So I will confirm in the group, WhatsApp group. I will send the link like today. Thank you. Jazakum Allah khair. And take care. Have a good day, and see you soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam, sir.
Salam. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.